Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9.3 support tier list video. So if you enjoy the content, be sure, like, subscribe. It helps other people find the channel. And be sure to check out the rest of the content as well. I just did a patch notes video, and I'm also going to do an AD carry video and a mid-tier list for 9.3. I might also try to squeeze in jungle and top lane if I have some time. And the other content as well, we have coaching sessions. I stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Individual champion guides, topical guides, individual champion playlists, all kinds of great stuff on the channel. So be sure to check all of that out. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So one thing that you'll notice a lot in this tier list, first of all, I did go back to the old format. I think this is something that just after looking at it a lot of people ask me, well, what about this champion? What about that champion? I didn't see it on the tier list. So I have decided to go back to the old school tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and just kind of target it for kind of a like a gold-ish audience, like gold that could also be silver, could also be platinum, kind of that sort of mid-tier audience. And then I'll talk about applications in lower elo, so or in higher elo. So I'll say, you know, Sona's great in this range. She's even better down in lower elos for these reasons, or she's maybe not as good in higher elos for these reasons. So I'll just talk about it verbally, how that'll fit into kind of the different elo brackets. But I'm just going to have one system that's kind of targeting that median range there of about gold or so. And then we'll go from there. But one thing that you'll notice, it's a lot of enchanters up near the top. Sona, Janna, Nami, Soraka are all up there. And I had somebody the other night on stream, and I've had a few people ask me, actually, well, why have I started playing Soraka? Or why have I started playing Sona recently? Oh, one other one I need to add on here is Rakan. It's a big one for me. And that's something at the very beginning of the season that anecdotally for me, you know, Sona has just been like through the roof winning for me. I'm like 86% in my last few games of Sona. I'm 76 overall, and I'm just losing with everything else. At the beginning of the season, I had an absolutely abysmal record. I'm at 46% now at the start of the season, which is still bad, but I was like down in the like low 30s or 20% at one point before I started spamming Sona all the time. And so people were asking me, well, why are you playing Sona so much? And, you know, my initial response was I'm winning a lot with her. But there's a lot more to it than that, and I wanted to talk about that. And it's not just me. It's not just like, oh, you know, Strategy Professor's doing well on Sona. It's everybody's doing well on Sona, right? If we look at win percentages here, she's the highest win rate champion. And some people, you know, have also said things like, oh, well, you know, why are all of a sudden now you on the Sona hype train? It's like, I've been on the Sona hype train at lower elos. I just haven't played her at platinum. So if we go back and look at you know, a couple of my tier lists here from the last couple of patches, right? Like right here. Top 5 Iron to Silver, Zyra, Brand, Sona, okay? So she's been in there. She's been in the mix. She's been top 3 Iron to Silver for numerous patches, right? If we go down here, take a look at her, number 3, okay? So I've recognized that Sona is very strong, and she has been a little bit weaker than the AP supports down in those brackets, but she's been good the whole time, and she's always going to have, like, a really high win rate as well. So right now she's the highest, but she's almost always, like, somewhere 52, 53, 54%. So what is it about Sona? We'll talk about her specific in a little bit, but I want to talk more about enchanters at large and then get that discussion moved into Sona specifically. So, you know, why did I start playing enchanters? Why have I kind of abandoned Rakan for now? Why have I moved away from Zyra a little bit? And why are the enchanters winning so much? Well, there's several things to consider since the beginning of the preseason leading up to now that have changed in terms of the meta that have made it a lot better for enchanters, and most notably Sona. And a lot of the reason that Sona specifically is that strong, which we'll talk about here in a second, is her itemization. She's the best user of Athene's Unholy Grail, and she's the best user of Ardent Censer, and they've nerfed Nami, and they nerfed Janna pretty significantly. And Soraka is good, but she also has some problems that we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. But what has changed in the meta around these champions, and then we'll talk about specifically why they're strong. Okay, first of all, Dark Harvest. So Dark Harvest was good before they reworked it. It was something that a lot of junglers like Kha'Zix and these other kind of Shaco, these other sort of burst junglers would be maxing up their camps and going for these kind of one-shots in the mid to late game. So it was very difficult to mitigate that much damage as a squishy support. So that was really bad. You know, if Kha'Zix was jumping out of invisibility with a million, you know, Dark Harvest stacks, he was going to kill you very quickly, right? Same thing with Shaco. Same thing with a lot of the popular junglers in the fall. Was Dark Harvest was really good in solo queue. Okay, well, they changed Dark Harvest, and they made it even more overpowered in the preseason. Right now, it did a ton of, like, upfront burst damage, particularly for high-damage champions in the bot lane. So you had champions like Jhin, Misfortune, Zyra, Brand, Lux, Xerath, just like any sort of AP support, anything that did a ton of damage early on in the preseason was really overpowered with that Dark Harvest, right? And I got a lot of ELO playing Zyra in that meta. That's another thing. I play what's effective in a meta. Some people ask me, well, do you ever play tanks? Do you ever play enchanters? Do you ever play AP supports? It's like, yeah, I do. Whenever they're really good, I play them. But I'm, you know, very quick to shift, to jump ship if I think something's weak, and to try something else out until I figure out something that works. Okay, but Dark Harvest having been nerfed a lot, right, from the fall version to the overpowered preseason version, and then that ultimately got nerfed out as well. So Dark Harvest way weaker. Electrocute also has been weakened over time. So remember that Electrocute used to do a lot more upfront burst damage on a 45-second cooldown, and they lowered it to where it's on a 25-second cooldown, but does significantly less damage. Okay, so that's lowering damage over time. And that's kind of the theme here with all of these changes, is they've been lowering the overall systemic damage in the game. And whenever they do that, it's going to make enchanters shine, because enchanters want longer fights. They want games to last longer as well in general, and that means they scale better because they're some of the highest scaling champions in the whole game. And we'll talk about why when we get down there and talk about Sona here in just a second. But overall, if the damage goes down in the game, enchanters are going to go up in the game, okay? So Dark Harvest, damage went down. Electrocute, damage went down. They just recently nerfed Ignite. Last patch in 9.2, damage is down. Jungle, they've nerfed, I think they nerfed Scuttle at some point since last fall, and they just nerfed the jungle last patch in terms of jungle experience overall. And I've had some junglers on the stream say, oh, well, that really doesn't kick in until late game. It's like, yeah, but it also affects early game, and it affects mentality, so that people don't even want to play, you know, like early game harassment junglers anymore because they're afraid they'll fall too far behind on farm. So we've seen a resurgence, and the win rates are true about this as well. It's a lot more kind of power farm junglers are starting to take off a bit more. So if you look at the win rates here, once again, win rates aren't everything, but there's certainly part of a larger trend that you can identify. Right? Nunu, Udyr, Shyvana. I guess Rammus isn't a hard farm jungler, but Shaco, Jarvan, you know, Warwick, Ivern, Vi, Kindred. Now, some of these can gank, and some of these are kind of relatively obscure picks with not a lot of, not a huge representation, not a huge weight, but a lot of them are some of these, you know, if they're not like explicitly hard farm junglers, most of them are not hard aggression, red smite, heavy gank junglers, right? Your Xin Zhaos, your Camille's, your Lee Sin's, your Kha'Zix's, all that stuff has dropped off significantly, at least in win rate. Now, you are still seeing them played. Zen is still a very strong champion. He is still getting played some. You do still see Kha'Zix. He's about 50%. He's getting played a decent chunk, but not to the same level they were. You know, Kha'Zix was 52, 53% with a much higher play rate. Zen, same thing. So those are kind of dipping down just a little bit. They're not extinct, but they're coming down just a little bit, right? And so that means you're going to have a slightly safer lane phase than you used to over time. Morellonomicon also got nerfed. Why is Morellonomicon important? Because that has the healing debuff on it. Now, if people want to get to the healing debuff, they're going to lose 10 AP. So a lot of people are just stopping at Oblivion Orb if they get that anyways, and moving on to another item. So that means that champions that have a heal, you know, like your Sona, your Nami, your Sorakas, they're going to be a lot stronger because that's one less champion you have to worry about that's going to get that. And a lot of AD carries just don't buy the Executioner's Calling. No matter how many times you tell them, trust me, I've told them, they just won't buy it when the Soraka's going off, right? And so, also because there are more AP junglers becoming represented, if you know, we look at that list again, there aren't a lot of like heavy AD. There are some, but like you've still got your Nunus, your Shyvanas, your Udyrs, Rammus, you know, Jarvan, Warwick. These champions don't want to buy Executioner's Calling. And so there's, you know, less and less opportunities for champions to buy that item particularly. So now Morellonomicon is another thing that's kind of disappearing a little bit. Specific nerfs to aggressive champions in the laning phase, or champions that cause enchanters problems, right? Brand got nerfed last patch. His win rate fell by 2 or 3%. Zyra's getting nerfed this patch. Win rate's probably going to fall by 2%. Pyke got nerfed out of his best build, which was tank Pyke. Now he has to go the super aggressive Pyke, which really isn't that great unless he gets very far ahead early. Alistar's damage on his E and his sort of auto attack off that E got nerfed really hard. Jhin got nerfed. His interaction specifically with Stormrazor got nerfed a lot in the preseason. What was that other thing he really abused? The Hail of Blades, that got nerfed a lot. So Jhin, has been dialed back. He, used to use Dark Harvest, be a Dark Harvest abuser. That got scaled back. So Jhin has been indirectly and directly nerfed a few times. He's one of the more aggressive laners. Misfortune, to an extent, has been nerfed by the Dark Harvest changes. Nami got nerfed. Now, Nami is an enchanter, but she was someone who was so good, she would squeeze out Sona. So I used to almost always recommend Nami over Sona, just because Nami has more CC later in the game. She doesn't scale as well, but she also had a more mana-efficient way of bullying people out in the laning phase. Well, in the fall, they took off a lot of healing off of her W, and so she's still pretty good, but that did open up more of a space for champions like Nami, like Janna, like Soraka to have a bit more of a chance during the laning phase against Nami. And then Rakan is a huge one. Rakan was so strong. He's so good in solo queue. I know that he didn't have a good win rate in solo queue before. He only had like a 47% win rate. But I won with that guy all the time. 57, 58% win rate on him in the preseason. He had such good engage. He was so versatile. He could, make it through the laning phase. He was also a big beneficiary of these other changes, right? Because then people couldn't bully him out as early, and he would get to scale and make these great engages. Well, now he's been basically gutted. That W change is absolutely brutal. If you try to do a long-range W on somebody, they have to be like, have 500 ping to not dodge what your W is. So it's really, really rough. I think Rakan's in a terrible place right now. I think they have said that they might buff him a little bit on the next patch, something about him, so we'll see. But that change right there has left me looking for somebody new as well. And he was really great because he could buy some of the enchanter items, if he needed to, right? So he'd start off with Zeke's, but he could go Ardent, he could go Redemption. A lot of times he went Knight's Vow, but I hate saying goodbye to Rakan, but it's just rough. It's rough right now. And people are starting to get some engage in other lanes. Not all the time, but I think junglers are starting to play some more engaged junglers like Sejuani. I've been seeing a lot more lately in solo queue. And then finally, the Stormrazor nerf on this patch is going to be really good because that's going to be a lot less upfront single item burst damage that people are going to have. So no longer are people going to grab that Stormrazor and just like blow you up if you're a squishy support. They're going to have to build up towards Infinity Edge, which is going to take a lot longer. And then it's not going to be as much of a guaranteed boom, you're dead, as Stormrazor was with that guaranteed crit. So I think that overall, a lot of AD carries are going to power down on one item. They might power back up a little bit on two. I talked about this in my patch notes video, and I'll talk about it in my 80 carry tier list video. But I think overall, this is either neutral for 80 carries, most of them, or it's actually bad, a lot of these changes for 80 carries. Because the new Infinity Edge is better as a rush, as a single item power spike, but I still don't think it's as good as Stormrazor is. The current, like the old Stormrazor before the change. At 2 items, it's about neutral, and then at 3 items, it's worse than the old Infinity Edge. So, anyways, a little bit less damage there on Stormrazor will be solid. That'll give you more times to scale. Other things that have been buffed that help her out. So, Forbidden Idol, that's the really obvious one for all enchanters. Getting back that 10% plus healing and shielding is such a massive deal. And I think, was it the CDR? I think they gave back 2% plus healing and shielding and 5% CDR on Forbidden Idol, which is just like insanely huge buff. This is one of the big things that hurt enchanters more than almost anything was the nerf to this item. But then I'm pretty sure they gave it back. No, they kept it at the 5% healing. Okay, they gave back the 2% on Ardent. So they ended up giving back the 5% cooldown reduction on it. Yes. Which is huge. That's adding on an additional like 130 gold value on an 800 gold item. So now it's right back to its like normalized value. It's 1-to-1 efficient, right? So it's 1.0, 100% efficient, Very, very good. So it used to be like really inefficient, like 80% or something efficiency. It just felt terrible to buy this item, and now it feels really good. And then, of course, they buffed back Ardent Sensor. They gave it back to 2% plus healing and shielding, which is not a huge deal. On Redemption, also not a huge deal. Mikhail's getting the 5% plus healing and shielding is a really big deal. But overall, it's just like, this is so much better, this Forbidden Idol. As someone who's played a lot of Enchanters, it's a very big deal that they did that fairly recently. Karthus, like, it's kind of running out of control in all lanes, jungle, mid lane, especially now that they're nerfing a lot of other champions out. So having somebody that has plus healing and shielding, having somebody who has access to Redemption or Locket or something like that is going to help out a ton versus Karthus. So Karthus is definitely a menace right now, and he's going to get much worse because they've nerfed out some of his competition, like Cassiopeia. She's still going to get played, but Karthus is going to be stronger, and especially now that there's like more power farming in the jungle. Where is Karthus even represented here? Let me see. Yeah, here he is. So he's only like 51%. He's still not super popular right now, but very strong, and Enchanters are very good against him. Sejuani's another one. The buff to Sejuani is great. The more tanks there are in the game, the better Enchanters get because of the way that they scale. Let me just explain that real quick in terms of, like, since I said how higher scaling works, because people may not immediately understand what that means and why Enchanters are so good in a tank meta. Because I haven't talked about Enchanters a ton, I don't think, recently. It had been a lot about AP supports and Rakan in past patch notes. So I'll just reiterate this really quickly. If you look at how armor works, I don't know if I still have armor pulled up here, but basically armor applies to shields, and it effectively applies to a heal. So let's say that someone just has 200 health, right? And then let's say they have 100 armor. Okay? To actually do that 200 physical damage to them, you have to do... or to take away that 200 health, you have to do 400 physical damage, because that armor is going to reduce the damage taken by 50%. Okay, so that's how armor works. Magic resist, same deal, exact same formula. So what a shield does is, let's say that you put a 200 shield on somebody. If they have 100 armor, then they're going to be taking, it's going to take 400 physical damage to break that 200 shield. So it's not just a 200 shield. It ends up being much more than that. So if someone only has 50 armor, for instance, so let's say like a squishy, jungler that's just going to have like base armor like Kha'Zix or something. It's not going to buy like any armor in the jungle. I mean, he might get Ninja Tabby or something, but let's just say he has 50 armor for the sake of it. So 100 divided by 150. So he's only going to block about 33% of the damage. And so it's going to be a lot less effective. So you're basically going to get 34% block, so that 100, you're only blocking 34%. So if someone has 100 armor, though, then you're blocking 50%. So 100 divided by 200, 50%. So that means that you're going to have to end up doing double damage in order to make that work, right? Because it's going to be 50% reduction. I can't do the 34 offhand, but you guys can see the logic behind that, right? That's the main point. Like, the numbers don't matter as much as the logic. And that's basically when people have more armor, when people have more magic resist, then heals and shields get a lot stronger. So when there are more tanks in the game, then it takes a lot more damage because they're going to have more armor and magic resist than squishy champions. Then it makes those heals and shields more effective, and it's going to take more damage to cancel those out. Right? And so that's why whenever tank metas start coming in, whenever people start getting more resistances, whenever there's less damage in the game, then those heals and shields start getting extremely strong. And the way that they stacks multiplicatively much higher, and we'll talk about Sona's specific numbers in a second, but it stacks much higher than damage in the game. Because it works with armor and magic resist rather than against armor and magic resist. So, if you have that 100 HP... or let's just say that someone has 100 HP, they have 100 armor, and you're giving them a 100 shield, then it's going to take 400 damage total to take them down, because they're going to have to cut through 200 on the shield, then 200 on the HP, and they're going to be done. Versus if you were just, instead of 100 shield, you're trying to do, 100 damage, then that's not going to be enough, to take them down. It's actually going to get reduced by 50%. right? So then you're only doing 50 damage, when in effect, it would make your shield, your 100 shield, a 200 shield. Right? Does that make sense? Sort of. I know I'm kind of talking in circles here. But basically, armor and magic resist reduces damage, but increases the effectiveness of shields. And that's part of why shields scale much harder. Also, there's a stat called plus healing and shielding in the game, which scales extremely well because most of these shields also have a base number, and they're going to have an AP ratio, and they're going to have plus healing and shielding, whereas a lot of damage is going to have some modifiers, and they work with resistances. That's 4 levels of scaling. You have base shield plus AP, some kind of AP ratio, plus healing, shielding, and then you're going to have plus resistances. So it's going to scale 4 times. And when you talk about damage, you can think about what do you have to like modify it, like magic damage, right? You've got penetration. You have something like maybe death cap that gives you a little bit more. You have cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction can also work with healing and shielding, though. It's going to make that better because you can cast more of them. There's just nothing in the game that's going to scale more than that. I mean, even like critical strike champs, right? Like with Infinity Edge, you've got critical strike, you have armor penetration, you have attack speed, you have base AD, like base and bonus AD. So that's got like 4 different kinds of scaling as well. So critical strike is close, but it just scales insanely high, like just super, super well. Okay, so that's kind of the story behind when you see champions like Sejuani coming back into the meta, when you see Nunu coming back into the meta, and some of these other tanks starting to crawl their way back in, that's going to be really good. Or when you see like 80 carries taking, that's another buff that I forgot to mention here, buff to overheal. So don't forget that last patch, overheal got buffed a ton, so that a lot more 80 carries are taking that instead of Triumph now. And if you're running something like Sona or like Soraka and you overheal them, which happens quite a lot in team fights, then if you're just spamming your W or spamming your heal on people, then that's going to be very, very effective on them, because then you're not losing effectiveness on your heal. It's translating into a shield. And so the fact that more people are taking overheal, more people have lifesteal in the 80 carry role, when you think about the Blade of the Rune King users like Lucian, like Vayne, who are both very popular right now, their lifesteal combined with your healing, combined with your shielding, combined with their overheal, just makes it extremely difficult to kill these champions in team fights. And so that's another thing that's helping him out a ton. And the final thing, or helping Enchanters out a ton, the final thing that I want to mention here is this prospect of taking barrier over exhaust. I get kind of harassed about this in some of my games, but this has already been standard practice on Soraka for a really long time. If you look at pro builds, virtually everybody takes barrier, right? And so what's the thought process behind this? Why do they take barrier instead of exhaust in a lot of these situations? That seems kind of weird. Why would you not want exhaust? And by the way, I've been on this train for a really long time. If you look in here, I was talking about when they nerfed exhaust way back in patch 7.5. I did the math and speculated that taking barrier, excuse me, particularly on Enchanters, could be really strong, especially if the 80 carry starts taking heal. So you could have either the support take heal and the 80 carry take barrier, or the other way around. But I was advocating this for a long time. Pro players didn't pick this up for like another 4 or 5 months. And then I think it was at Worlds, or maybe later on, where people started running that all the time. Right? And so this isn't a new thing. This has been around for a long time. This has always been an option. The thing is, they buffed Ignite like through the roof at some point during Season 8. So that completely took this off the table. But now that they've nerfed Ignite and they're taking a lot of excess damage off the table, it's worth considering barrier again, and worth considering why, why Soraka takes barrier, and whether or not that could apply to other champions. So what's up with barrier versus exhaust? How do they stack up versus each other? Okay, well, first of all, barrier's on a 3-minute cooldown versus a 3.5-minute cooldown, so it's going to be up much more often. And it can be much more effective, particularly in early game skirmishes when you're trying to power up, than exhaust. Okay, but as the game goes on, if a single target is doing a ton of damage, Exhaust is going to be way better against that target, right? So if you're taking 500 damage at level 6, for example, from an all-in, you know, the Zyra all-ins you with, you know, her plants and all that crap, Barrier would block 215 damage, and Exhaust would only block 200 damage. Now, this is assuming you exhaust them before they do any damage to you, basically. So you have to be in range to touch them, so 650 range for the exhaust, and you have to actually exhaust them before they put down most of their damage. Barrier as well, you have to, you know, press before they do all their damage, but I think Barrier triggers faster than exhaust, and it doesn't require you being in range with that champion, so those are just some other things to consider. If you're taking 1,000 damage at level 11, however, then Barrier is going to block 315, and Exhaust is going to block 400. However, there are a couple other things people don't think about with Barrier. First of all, Barrier blocks Ignite. Exhaust does not stop Ignite damage because Ignite is true damage. So true damage, other forms of reduction, do not stop true damage. Okay? So Ignite is going to do full damage through the exhaust, and Ignite is one of the things that usually is going to kill you in one of the all-ins. So that's one thing that's important to note. It's also one of the last things people cast on you a lot of times. So when they go in, they do all their damage, then they Ignite to finish you off a lot of times. So even if you're late to the party, you don't Barrier fast enough, your Barrier can still stop that Ignite at the end. Whereas if you're a little bit late on the exhaust, then it's not going to help you against the Ignite at the end, right? So Barrier, it's a little bit better if you're late to the party with Barrier than it is with exhaust, okay? Another thing to keep in mind is that Barrier scales with plus healing and shielding and the rune Revitalize, which is something you're going to take all the time. So, on Enchanters. So, if you're low on health, if you're below 40%, you actually end up getting 15% more value out of this. And if you have, like, Ardent Censer plus Redemption, that's an additional 20% plus healing and shielding. Okay? Outgoing... I'm not sure if this stacks multiplicatively. I'm going to assume it's additively, like it's plus healing and shielding, but your plus healing and shielding might calculate first. So you might get 20% from Redemption and Ardent Censer, and then 5% from Revitalize, and then an additional 10% of that. That new number, which would make this even better than I'm about to calculate. But I'm just going to assume it's flat. So you would get 15% off of this, 20% off of plus healing and shielding. And then that number, that 315... So 315 times 1.35 equals 425. So now it's actually more than the exhaust, even in one of those like 1,000 burst damage extreme cases, because it does scale with plus healing and shielding. And it can also block Ignite. That Barrier also benefits from armored magic resist. So once again, it's not just a 315 Barrier. If you end up having, you know, 100 armor, which is kind of like, you're not going to have that on an enchanter, but you're going to get that extra damage, right? It's going to be 50% more effective if you have 50 armor, right? So it's going to be somewhere around the neighborhood after all these buffs with Revitalize and all that crap. It's going to be somewhere around like 600 plus damage to break that barrier when it just on paper looks like 315. Okay. So that's one thing to note. And then finally, I've mentioned this a couple of times, Barrier blocks range damage. So if it's like an 80 carry that's hitting you from a distance, or if it's like a Zyra sniping you, or a Jinx rocket, or whatever it is, Barrier can still block that. Barrier also blocks multi-enemy damage. So if you have like two enemies beating down on you, right, it's the support and the 80 carry firing shots at you, the Barrier can block that. Right? Whereas exhaust, you have to pick one person to exhaust, and then you take full damage from anybody else. So those are kind of the perks of Barrier. Obviously, the major perk with exhaust is you can use it to help other people. You can't use Barrier to help other people. So if your 80 carry is getting focus fired, you can't do anything with Barrier. So that's the biggest knock against it. Another thing is you can use it offensively, so you can get that slowdown to run people down. So those are a couple of things you're missing if you do take Barrier versus exhaust. But in general, in most team fights, if you're playing something like a Soraka or a Sona, if you just stay alive in the fight, then like you're going to win the fight. You're going to be able to keep everyone else alive. And that is sort of the reasoning behind Soraka with Barrier. It's just like, if you don't die, you can consistently keep healing other people over and over and over again in the fight. And that's your best way to keep them safe is with exhaust. So just having that safety with the barrier, having the scaling with plus healing and shielding, being able to block multiple targets, being able to block ignite, all of that outweighs exhaust. And that's something I've been doing on Sona. Not every game. You know, I switch it up. I got, you know, exhaust here, ignite here. But there have been several games where I've started taking barrier a little bit more. And I've found it extremely useful in all-in situations. And especially with Sona, you heal yourself up with W. So if you just block some of that damage, if you're about to die, and you can just block the damage and walk out and cast another W or two, then you're probably going to be right back up to full health. So that's kind of my long-winded explanation, because I know people have been saying, well, why Enchanters all of a sudden? What's going on? Did you just feel like playing Enchanters? It's like, no, I didn't just feel like it. This is like, this stuff is real. This has changed. And this is why I've kind of made the decisions that I've made. Okay, so let's switch over. Let's start talking about the actual tier list here. I'll have that timestamp, so if you don't care about me explaining all that meta shift, that's fine. But this has been a real shift in the meta, and I wouldn't be surprised if this starts filtering over into higher level play as well. I think it's already crept up from like silver and low gold into platinum into being very effective, and I wouldn't be surprised if it starts moving up as tanks start coming back into higher elos as well. You may not see Sona up there. You might see Sona, but you might start seeing more things like Lulu or Karma, Nami, stuff like that. You might see Sona. We'll see. Well, let's go ahead and talk about Sona. So why is Sona the queen bee of enchanters? And don't mistake it, she is the queen bee of enchanters. What's up with that? Why is she so good right now? Well, a lot of this just comes down to numbers. She's just a stat check. Like, she has her numbers are so massively large compared to other champions. If you're in a fight for, you know, more than 5 seconds is what I always say. If you get off 2 Ws, the fight's done. You win, basically, because nobody's going to be able to put out these numbers like Sona does, okay? So they might look fairly innocuous, like, oh, it's not a big deal. But particularly when you start thinking about team fights where these numbers start applying to 4 or 5 different people, the numbers start to get pretty crazy pretty quickly. And I talk about this in my Sona guide, so watch that if you want more details, but I'll just go through a little bit here. The most important one is the W. So this heal looks pretty small. It's only 210, but you have to keep in mind this heal affects you and one other person, so it's 2 heals, right? So it's really 220 is the base. With a 0.5 AP ratio. That's just the heal. And it ends up being, it's a 6-second base cooldown, but your crescendo lowers the cooldown by a lot. So at level 11, you basically get 25% cooldown reduction. And then if you just naturally have like 30% on top of that, this ends up being a lot closer to like 3 seconds, 3 or 4 seconds on your W. Compared to something like a Lulu shield, which is 10 seconds, Janna shield, which is 10 seconds, Nami wave, which is 10 seconds. You're going to be able to fire off like 2 or 3 of these, depending on your CDR, before they're able to get their next one going. So really, this 220, if you're getting off 3 of them in a fight, by the time, you know, Nami gets off one of hers, that 220 is like 660 compared to, you know, what they're putting out. That doesn't include the shield. So you get 125 shield as well. So it's going to shield you, and it's going to shield anyone else that comes close. So if you shield 3 people with this, you and like just touch 2 other people in a team fight, well, now all of a sudden, this is 375 shield with 210 healing. So that's almost 500 combined healing and shielding. 3 people touched here is a 0.9. This is a 0.5. That's a 1.4 AP ratio. So now we have a 500 plus healing and shielding with a 1.4 AP ratio that's going to be on a 3 or 4 second cooldown. And by the way, it procs Ardent Sensor on everybody that touches that shield. And the shield can also, the shield and the heal can also proc Athenes over and over and over again every time you press this. And the shield also procs Airy on people. It also triggers Revitalize on anyone that's low. So you can see really quickly how these items start stacking up to become ridiculous, especially on a cooldown that's this low. And that's something really simple. You know, if you go for like, oh, you're hitting all 5 people with this, well, then that's like 625 plus 220. You know, it's like 880 or something base with a 2.0 AP ratio. So that means it's 880 base. And if you just even have like 100 AP, which is super easy to get on Sona, like Athene's Unholy Grail by itself is typically going to give you somewhere between like 70 to 90 AP easily. So 100 is like child's play. That puts you over 1,000 effective health plus healing and shielding every 3 seconds in a fight, right? So that's where it starts getting crazy. I mean, even Soraka can't keep up with that, right? Soraka's like single target healing like every 2 seconds for like 200 with, I think it's like a 0.6 ratio or something like that. So it's pretty good. She can get off 2 of those by the time you get off one of these. But this bad boy right here in a team fight is like over 1,000 health and shielding every 3 seconds, and no one's going to match that in a team fight. And this stays up for a while. Like this aura stays up, I think it's like 3 seconds or something. Yeah, the aura stays up for 3 seconds. So it's not like you instantly have to be close to everybody to give them the shield. You can cast this, tag one person, and then just like walk around and tag everybody else that you can reach for these extra things. Oh, and by the way, it also basically exhausts them for 3 seconds. So you pretty much have a permanent exhaust on them. Not quite as big as a normal exhaust, but even with 100 AP, it's minus 20% or 29% damage for 3 seconds. And this is going to be up every 3 seconds, so it's permanently up. So now you have an ability that you can spam in team fights that has over 1,000 effective plus healing and shielding, triggers all of these OP items like Athene's Unholy Grail, Ardent Censer, constantly, triggers Airy constantly, and you're able to basically reduce somebody's damage by 30% like all the time. It's just ridiculous. Like, you just can't beat that. Like, you have to blow her up instantly. If you do not kill Sona immediately and she has 2 items, you're done. Like, you're going to lose the fight most of the time. And then her Q, that's just her W. Her Q also, if we look at this, the damage on this is through the roof. So this looks like, oh, that's not that much. It's 160. It hits 2 people. 2 people. So that's 320 damage with a 1.0 ratio. Just you attacking for 70 mana. So 320 damage with a 1.0 AP ratio for 70 mana that ends up being on like a 2-second cooldown. Oh, and by the way, it basically has 30% spell vamp for your team. You know, so pre-mitigation, it's even better than spell vamp. So when you hit them for like, you know, I don't know, like 400 damage, 30% of that is going to, or it might even be, I think it's 35%, converts over to Athene's healing. So that means that you're actually healing people for an extra 100 every time you cast Power Chord every, you know, 2 seconds or so. You're getting a 100 extra heal on top of this crazy number here. And that heal is also affected by plus healing and shielding. That heal can also proc Airy. That heal is also affected by Revitalize. So that's why sometimes you'll see a Sona, you know, she'll press W and it'll heal somebody for like half of their health. You're like, what the hell? How does that work? Well, it's because of all that plus healing and shielding and the Athene's proc, which also benefits from plus healing and shielding. So you're just churning out a ton of damage, and that doesn't even include doing damage to other people. So if you tag 3 other people with this, that's 90 extra damage with an extra 0.9. So now we're talking about a base of 410 base damage with a 1.9 AP ratio on a 2-second cooldown for 70 mana when you spam this in a team fight, if you're touching people with it. It's just like, her numbers are just ridiculous. That's so much damage you're able to put down. That's so much healing and shielding. Just a ludicrous amount. You can't even shut this down with a Morello's or an Executioner's Calling. You can shut down the healing part. Okay, you cut this in half, so instead of 220, you know, it's only dealing 110 with a little bit more. Okay, well, what are you going to do about that, like, 800 shield that just came through? You know? It's just really, really hard to deal with this, especially when she gets Athene's plus either Redemption or Ardent Censer. Both of those are super strong on her. This is pretty good, just a 1-point wonder. You can just kind of zip around the map a little bit with this. It gives you extra speed. It gives your team extra speed, so everyone can kind of move around a bit. It gives you a slow if you want that, to try to run people down. And then she has a really good teamfight ultimate. Just AoE, like 1.5 second stun. The damage is not insane on it. It's okay. But like a 1.5 second AoE stun in addition to all of this other stuff. So that's why she's the queen. She just scales extremely hard off of 1 item, 2 item, and 3 items. If you don't kill her immediately on 2 items, your team just wins the team fight basically automatically. And she has really good trading early on in lane. If you have an aggressive laner, you have a Lucian or a Draven, and they actually step up and help you harass, this does a lot of damage early on. And you have a self-heal. And you get to abuse things like Airy early on as well, so it transitions from damage into shielding later on, and she's a huge fairy charm abuser. You can also get amp tomes early, which is even more damage without being troll. You know, you can get Frostfang amp tome, tons of damage, not troll. You can totally build that into Athene's Unholy Grail or Ardent Censer. So just like her build path is crazy. It's like all fairy charms and amp tomes early on, so she gets tons of damage, tons of mana regen, and then builds into some of the most OP items on her and just on any champion in the game in terms of cost efficiency. It's ridiculous. Like Ardent Censer, when you put Censer on 5 people, let me pull this up real quick. We'll just look at this and we'll move on. Because it actually has the math for this on there, so I don't even have to do the math for you. When you put Ardent Censer on 5 people, that's not even at level 18. But it's 2,700 gold base at level 1. Let's see, grand total, 1 ally plus caster buffed. Okay, this is like total buff here, because that's just one ally in addition to this. That's the 375 or whatever for 2 people. So that's just like one group of people. Then it's like 150% efficient. If you tag all of your allies, then it goes anywhere from 199 to almost 400% gold efficient. 400% gold efficiency on this item. People ask me, why don't you build Lichbane? Whatever. I'm like, this is why. You know what Lichbane is? It's about 80% gold efficiency. Now, yes, you do get the Sheen proc. Yes, that does look cool. You do a little bit of damage. But at the end of the day, it's 71% gold efficiency. How do you want to value Spellblade? You want it to be 100% efficient? That's way over budget. But even if we make it that, even if we say this is 171% efficient, if you're like getting good Sheen procs in, I don't even know how you would quantify this. It's nowhere close to that number. But just to be generous, like you're not going to get anywhere close to 400% efficiency. Like you're not even going to get to 200% efficiency. This is 200% efficient if you touch everybody at level 1. If somehow you could have this item in your inventory and everybody's level 1, it would still give you that. So it's just like absurd. It's like basically whenever you buy this item, if it's 300% gold efficient, just for sort of context there, that would be like, you know, paying 2,300, let's see, and you would get times 3. It's like 6,900. 6,900. And then minus the 2,300, 4,600. So you're basically just conjuring up 4,600 gold whenever you buy this item, if it's 300% efficient. Even if it's, let's just say it's not even that crazy. Let's just say it's 200% efficient. It's basically like you're conjuring up 2,300 gold to get to 200%, which is super easy to do on this item, right? You know what 2,300 gold is? You know what a kill is? A kill is about 300 gold, not including the assist. But let's even include the assist. Why not? Let's just call it 450 gold whenever you get a kill, divided by 450. It's basically like when you buy that item, you get 5 free kills. Like when you buy Ardent Censer on Sona, it just says pentakill across your screen because that's what just happened. When you buy that item, like that's how cost efficient this is. It basically gives you 5 kills for free whenever you buy this item. And it can get even better. That's like a baseline scenario. But just imagine in your head, you're just here pentakill whenever you buy Ardent Censer on Sona. Like, that's why you don't buy Lichbane on Sona, because this item is stupid on her. It's so good. The same thing with Athene's Unholy Grail. The numbers aren't quite as clean and easy to calculate on her, but trust me, it's very close. It's an extremely ridiculously powerful item on her. So yeah, Sona is super, super strong right now. A lot of that's because the damage has slowed down in the game significantly, and they've nerfed the other enchanters like Janna a lot, but then also like Nami. So those two are still very, very good, but that has made Sona the queen bee, I think, right now, because of all those changes I spent 30 minutes talking about there. Okay, So lane pressure, she applies a lot of lane pressure, does a lot of damage. You know, she's able to get priority usually in the lane if you have an AD carry that has a pulse, which is asking a lot sometimes. But, you know, so good lane pressure, decent kill threat, not amazing, very unsafe. You have no escapes, so you really have to position well. Barrier helps a lot with that, but just being really aware of the jungler, having good ward coverage, that helps out a ton too. Scaling is through the roof by far. She should have like a 6 in scaling. One of the highest scaling champions in the game, period, especially for team fights, and definitely super high as support. And she's so easy to play. So easy to play. Like, by far, one of the easiest supports to play. Like, her only skill shot is Crescendo, and it's a huge, wide skill shot. It's kind of hard to miss this thing, although I miss it, you know, more than I should on stream. But it's a huge hitbox. It's got a long range on it. Everything else is you can just run around in circles and just, like, mash your hands on the buttons. If you have 2 items, and you'll probably win the team fight. I mean, really good Sona play. You're going to be positioning well, and you're going to be timing it so that you hit your green shot on priority targets, you know, to make sure that you're reducing that damage on who you want to reduce the damage on. But, you know, by and large, she's super easy to play, which means she's very, very reliable. You can get really consistent results out of her. She does not have a high learning curve at all. So, very good. Super strong champion right now, overpowered. And then you just want to go Airy, Mana Flow Band. I like Absolute Focus because you heal yourself off of your W, so usually you're going to be above that 70%. It did get nerfed, but at the same time, it's still, AP is extremely powerful on her, as we just talked about, so I think you still want Absolute Focus. And then Water Walking, if you think you're going to rotate a lot. You can also take Scorch if you think you're actually going to be able to have a big impact on the lane, if you think your AD carry is going to help you out. You can also even take Gathering Storm because, once again, AD super strong, and if the game goes long, she's going to be really powerful there, so that's good. And then I think you definitely have to have Revitalize, and then whatever you get second is kind of up to you. I like Bone Plating just to prevent all ends on you. If it's a poke lane, you could get Second Wind. Another build, you can do a Klepto build with her as well. You can go like Klepto, Boots, Biscuits, Cosmic Insight, and then Revitalize and Bone Plating. I like that build. It does give you some extra gold in the laning phase. So if you're against like a really passive lane, like they have a Braum, Ezreal, or something like that, maybe you could go that build. You know, Klepto usually ends up giving you 400 or 500 gold in the laning phase, so that can really help you get to those bigger items, right? Your Redemptions, your Athenes. So that can be good, but you are giving up Airy. That's the big thing, and Airy is super strong on her. Just because you can spam it over and over and over again. All of your auras proc Airy, by the way. It's not just W. Your Q procs Airy and your E procs Airy. I didn't realize that until recently. So it's not just your W, but every single aura procs Airy. So that means that Airy is up always on everybody. And it scales really, really hard. It scales with plus healing and shielding. And then at its top level, it has 80 base shield. So you're not going to have that 80 most of the time. You know, but in the mid game, you know, you're still going to have 60 around level 11, which is a huge amount, especially because it scales with Revitalize, it scales with plus healing and shielding, and it benefits like all other shields from armor and magic resist. So super, super powerful rune on her. So I've come to the conclusion, I think you have to take Airy all the time, although Klepto Sona is cute. If you want a lot of gold against the passive lane, just to accelerate your build a bit, can be good, but Airy is where I would go most of the time. And then mobility boots, you can also get defensive boots if you need to. Ninja Tabby, Merc Treads, whatever. Watcher, and then Ardent Sensor, Athenes, and Redemption. The order that you get these can vary. Sometimes I get Athenes first if my AD carry is not doing that well, or if I don't have a an AD carry at all, if I have a mage like a Heimerdinger or Cassiopeia, something like that bottom lane. You can skip Ardent and just go Athenes and Redemption, and that can be very powerful. I wouldn't go Redemption first item. I would, just because it like you gain more when you're a higher level with that. But I think that either Athenes or Ardent can both be good depending on how well your AD carry is doing. Mikhail's is also on the docket here that you can get, you know, as like a third item in some circumstances. If they have like an Ashe or a Thresh or a Lux or whatever, and you just need to cleanse somebody, then Mikhail's can be good. And it's good even if you have an Athenes. Like, it's just going to shut off the healing part of the Mikhail's, but at that point in the game, you probably don't need it. It's okay. So you can do Athenes plus Mikhail's in some circumstances if you need to. Okay, let's talk about the others here for the last 11 minutes. I just really wanted to make the case for Enchanters and for Sona because that's something that, you know, I think has changed a lot. It's been trending that way for a while. But like I said, the recent nerfs to some of these things, the Storm Razor, the Zyra, the Pyke, the Ignite, the Morellos, the buffs to Overheal, all of these things have changed like in the last 1 or 2 patches, like the mega nerf to Rakan. All of that is very, very recent. So I don't think I'm too late to the party here. You know, it's like maybe last patch she should have been up a little bit higher. But overall, still very, very strong. Okay, Janna's another one who I think can still be really good. She has been nerfed a lot. She doesn't have the early presence as Sona. She doesn't quite have the insane auras and scaling that Sona does, but she still scales pretty well. But her major contribution is she's peel. So if you have an AD carry that you really want to protect, that you trust is going to do well, then having that peel is good. And she's good against all-in champs. So if they try to pick like a Leona or something, Sona can get blasted by Leona early because they can just all-in diver. Whereas Janna's going to have answers to that with her tornado, with her ultimate. So Janna's really good into things like Zac. If you see Zac coming out more, or Lee Sin, or Jarvan, just all of these champions that want to try to close the gap on you that can be interrupted, Janna is going to be good. So Janna does have, you know, noticeable weakness in the laning phase. Her shield is on a massive, like, 18-second cooldown early. So she does get busted up by champions like Nami, by champions like Sona. But as the game goes on, as she gets her 10-second shield, she does give an extra 40 AD on her shield, which is really, really good with crit champions because, of course, this AD can crit. Right? So if someone crits with that 40, then they're going to end up doing somewhere along the lines of like 90 damage off of this. That AD later on in the game can be huge. That also scales off of abilities. You know, so if it's something like Kaisa or something like Varus who has like some strong AD, like bonus AD scaling abilities, then that can be a really good combo as well. So she has been nerfed a lot, but she's still really good. She rotates fast. This ultimate still heals for an insane amount. You know, 600 with 150% AP. Although, ironically, remember, just one touch of Sona's W that's on a 3-second cooldown can put out even... Well, this can actually affect all 5 people as well. So if we're really getting technical, if 5 people stood in this, including Janna herself, that would end up being a 3,000 base heal. Or actually... Yeah, 3,000, that's total heal. Yeah, 3,000 heal with a 750% AP ratio. So, yeah, that's going to be better than a Sona W. But, yeah, just going to be strong. But you would primarily pick her over Sona if they have hard engage and you need peel. So they have the Jarvan, they have the Zac, they have the Lee Sin, whatever it is that you're kind of scared of. Leona specifically in lane. Janna is very, very good against Leona. Then you might want to consider Janna over Sona. So Sona overall going to be a lot more raw power, but Janna's going to be safer and she's going to have more peel for your team. So that would be the situation where you would pick Janna. I still think she's good. Statistically, I don't know. She's still probably pretty high up there. Yeah, she's still at like 51, 52%, but she's trending upwards a little bit as well. So yeah, with Janna, just Airy, Mana Flow Band, same thing. It's going to be a lot of this on the champions. Absolute Focus and Bone Plating Revitalize. Water Walking, you know, once again, depends on the matchup. All 3 of those could be good situationally, either Gathering Storm or Scorch. Those can all be decent. Okay, then Mobility Boots, Nomad. You can go Frostfang on her, but it's a little bit harder to trigger it on her than it is on Janna in a safe way. So, I like Nomad. I like getting the coins. I like the move speed. So that's what I would go. And then Ardent Sense of Redemption. I like Mikhail's. You can go with Athene's. The problem is she doesn't put out nearly the same kind of damage that Sona does with Athene's. So you don't get the same kind of benefits as other champions with the Athene's. I think she's a much better Mikhail's user. Because all you really do, like the only things that do a lot of damage are like your W to a single target and like your auto attacks. You know, because you don't get credit for that, like the AD damage that you shield your AD carry with. You don't. That doesn't charge up Athene's. So, I really like Mikhail's in more situations than not. But you can get Ardent Sensor, I guess, if it makes sense at certain times. It still does give a lot of AP, which is really nice. So, Ardent's on the Athene's is on the table, but not quite as good on her as is on other champs. Okay, Nami, still going to be strong, has good trading early on. She brings a lot more CC to the table than Sona, Janna, and she's very good at sort of chasing people down. So each one of your abilities is going to speed people up, including you can bubble your own allies in a pinch if you need to speed them up. And then you're going to be able to slow people down as well with your E. You know, when you put that on an ally, it's going to add a slow to their auto attacks. Your wave is really long range. If it hits people, it applies a super slow. And she has pretty good scaling with AP as well. So, still pretty good. They did nerf the heal portion quite a bit. It used to heal for more than that, but it's still pretty decent. But it is on a longer cooldown. It does cost a ton of mana, especially early on. But if you're taking some good trades with ebb and flow early, then it can be really good. So it's very efficient on one spell. You know, with Sona, you have to press Q to do the damage, and then W if you want to heal. So, you know, it can be a bit more mana intensive early on, whereas this, you just spam W on them over and over and over again. So Nami's still going to be pretty good. That wave is very easy to play around unless you have other CC that people are already applying. It does have an animation, which can be really annoying and slow. So, like, if someone's going to jump on you and you try to wave them, you know, she, like, twirls her wand in the air. It takes, like, half a second and then casts it. And sometimes you die before you can get it off. Whereas with Sona, I feel like that comes out a lot faster. And that's, a guaranteed 1.5 second stun, right? It's not just a slow and a little mini knock-up for half a second there. So, Sona outscales her, but Nami is going to be... has more CC, has more all-in potential, is going to be a little bit safer because her spells have higher abilities. She doesn't have to walk into close range to try to tag people with any kind of auras. She can stay max range if she wants to and just play from the back line. So I think that is one of her strengths. She also has slightly higher base stats, I believe. Her move speed is 10 higher than Sona's. I think she has a little bit more armor than Sona does, but she's still going to be pretty squishy at the end of the day. But yeah, that's just pretty, like, if you have a team comp that's really movement based where you want to hunt people down, like if you have a Vayne, maybe an Ezreal, something like that, and you want to have some more kiting in your kit, then Nami can be pretty good. Okay. Let's keep moving here. So Soraka's still going to be good. I hear a lot of people, you know, like, why isn't Soraka higher? One of the major reasons for this is she hurts herself with her heal. Okay, so that's going to make her a lot more vulnerable. So, you know, Sona heals herself with her heal and heals one other person, where Soraka hurts herself. Now, Soraka's heal does put out more healing than Sona's does, and it's on a short cooldown at 2 seconds. But remember, this does not apply any shields other than, like, Airy, right? And so Sona's, if you're in a team fight and you're actively, you know, tagging a bunch of people with the W, it's going to outdo this, especially because it doesn't cost any health most of the time. But as far as keeping single targets up, this can be very strong. Sona does have good harassment in the lane if you can hit a lot of your Qs. This is very cost efficient. It does damage, it heals you, and it also empowers your when you heal other people so that your healing becomes even more effective. And then you get movement speed, which is good for rotating to tough fights where you need to heal people out of it. And then your ultimate, you know, provides a huge point-click heal that has global threat on it. So someone can just be in a fight top lane, and then, you know, you just cast Wish on them, and it's going to heal them. So that can be very helpful as well. And then Equinox is like, okay, you know, it's got a bit of a silence to it. You know, some people will try to max this first so that they deal more poke damage. I think that's a little silly, especially after they nerfed Scorch and Airy. I would just try to hit your Qs. If you're not hitting your Qs, I just wouldn't be playing Sona in the laning phase. I try to go for 2 or 3 points of Q and then max your Astral Fusion after that. And then just save 1 point for Equinox. It's like, yeah, especially against other enchanters. It's like, yeah, you can, you know, just press Equinox on them and do some point-click damage, but it's on a really long cooldown. They're probably going to heal a lot of that back with their Fleet Footwork and their Doran Blade and their, you know, Vamp Scepter or their Sona or whatever. I just feel like the cooldown's just way too long to be consistent damage. I know there were some Sorakas back in the day that were maxing Equinox, but you got to remember the context for that was Area and Scorch were a lot stronger when that was happening. So, anyways, she can be pretty strong. I just think that she's a bit more vulnerable than some of the other champions because she's very slow and she doesn't have much CC. At least Sona has like her AoE ult. Nami has her wave. But Soraka, if left checked, can be really good. Now, it's important to note that she gets screwed over the most by grievous wounds. So if they get something like Executioners or Morellonomicon, that hurts her a ton because her entire kit is basically her healing. And if you don't have that, that's a big deal. Versus with Sona, you can get around it with the shield. And with Nami, it kind of sucks to have the healing debuff, but at least you have so much CC between your bubble, your E, and your ult. You can still function even if they are lowering your healing. So I think ultimately that's going to bring down Soraka just a little bit, although she can still be strong. And then finally we have Thresh. So Thresh can be really good in the right circumstances. It's just very, very questionable. Like, you have to be aggressive. You have to get kills if you're going against these enchanters, right? You got to go for the flash plays. You have to hit those hooks because if Sona gets 2 items and you're sitting there with 2 items, she's going to absolutely destroy you in most team fights. So you are on the clock. You have to dominate that lane and you have to take over that game, you know, before 20 minutes or you're just going to lose. So that's kind of the problem with Thresh is like he has a really good toolkit. He just doesn't have the numbers, right? His base stats are low. He doesn't synergize with a lot of items out there. And he just is not going to have enough power later on to compensate for the Sona or the Janna or the Nami. They're just running around, disrupting and healing everybody. So that's something that you're going to have to fight through. If your team has a ton of burst damage, you know, like if you have a Jhin in the bot lane or a Draven or something like that, he can work really, really well. You just have to make sure that you're able to convert those hooks. Because if you just don't have the firepower for it, if you have an Ezreal on your team, and, you know, Sona's already got that Athene's Unholy Grail, you're probably not killing people. It's probably going to be too late. So Thresh can be really good. He's got the hook. He's got the lantern. He's got the flay. He just doesn't have a very good rune right now. He kind of has to take Aftershock or Barrier, or Guardian, rather. And you're just kind of stuck taking stuff like Zeke's, which has also been nerfed, or Knight's Vow, which you only get half effectiveness out of. A lot of Threshes, I think, are just going Redemption these days, just like Redemption Locket, I believe. And it's like, that's not that great on Thresh, but it's just something that people feel like they have to do, I think. Yeah, pretty much everybody's going Redemption these days on him. Just Redemption Locket, the old school builds. The problem is this build has been nerfed a lot. They nerfed it, I believe, in either 2018 or 2017. But yeah, you don't have a lot of healing and shielding. You've got your lantern, but it's not great. You're not getting any other plus healing and shielding items. So, you know, they nerfed Redemption to where it has really low base numbers, but if you have plus healing and shielding, then you get triple value for it on Redemption. So you're really encouraged to get things like Mikhail's or Ardent Censer. He's just not going to get those items most of the time, right? So the base is going to be, on your Redemption, is going to be much, much lower than something like a Sona. And then Locket's also going to be pretty low because you're not going to have a ton of bonus health, right, that you get off of items. And you're not going to have a lot of plus healing and shielding that can make that shield off a Locket better. So either way you cut it, you're just kind of getting suboptimal items that just aren't amazing on Thresh. And you're just getting runes that aren't that crazy on Thresh. You know, they're okay. And he's just very conditional. You have to hit your hook. Your allies have to click on your lantern. You have to be able to flay back really fast, you know, movements a lot of times, like Alistar, if you want to be successful with him. So he can work. You can be very good on him. He obviously has a super high win rate right now with a really high play rate at sort of the challenger level. But for most people, you know, they're like gold and lower, I think he can be a tough pick, although he is super popular. What's his win rate in Platinum? It's a respectable like 51, and he is picked like, you know, 28% of the time. So he's okay. You got to make him work. You got to land your skill shots. Okay, Zyra was tier 1 for a long time. I think she's going to step down a little bit on this patch. She is getting nerfed, and it doesn't look like it's a lot. It's just 4 off of her plant, but you got to keep the percentage in mind, right? Like 4 damage off of 24 damage on her plant in the early game. That's 1/6, right? So that's like 17% less damage on her plants. So that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt a lot because remember, these plants fire a lot, right? It's not like they just hit once. They're going to hit several times. And her ultimate empowers the plants as well. So they're going to be hitting and they're going to be doing bonus damage a lot. And so we'll see. You know, you can still win with Zyra. You can still do a lot of damage. She doesn't have a lot of synergy with Ezreal or Vayne. They're just not going to have enough power to follow you up in lane, or Kai'Sa. They're not going to have enough power, or really Twitch, to, you know, beat people down with you. If you want to pair her with like a Draven or a Jhin or a Misfortune, that can work. But a lot of the most popular champs right now, you know, the Ezreal, how popular are those champions? Ezreal, Vayne, Kai'Sa. I'm going to guess that they make up 60% of what people are playing right now. Let's see. It might even be more than that. Okay, so Lucian is picked 29% of the time. Okay, so Ezreal's 32. Kai'Sa's 29. So what's that? That's 61%. And then Vayne is 23%. Yeah, that's 84%. So 84% of the time, people are picking Ezreal, Kai'Sa, or Vayne. Now, these percentages, you might say, well, this adds up to way more than 100%. That's true. That's because it could be on either team, right? But I'm just saying these things are, like, super prevalent. Super prevalent. So, you know, we'll see. It just, those aggressive champions, they're still out there, right? The Draven's there, the Misfortune's there, the Jhin's there, but people are just picking those champs a lot less than others. And so I think you have to have that to make up for Zyra's loss of damage here in order to make her really strong in the laning phase. And you're going to get outscaled like super hard by the Enchanters if you don't blow them up a lot. Because they're buying items like Ardent Censer that has like 200, 300% efficiency at like 2,300 gold, whereas you're buying items that are going to have like, you know, 100% efficiency, maybe up to 150% efficiency at, you know, like 3,000 plus gold. So it's just going to take you a lot longer to come online if you don't get those kills early. Okay, Leona's another one that can be really nice into Enchanters, you know, especially into Sona. You get that nice point click that goes through minions, so you can just attach to her, blow her up. Very good if you have an aggressive lane, you know, if you have the Draven, you have the Misfortune, something like that, or you have a really aggressive early jungler that's going to camp for you, the Lee Sin, that type of thing. Then she can be good. But once again, not amazing with Vayne early, not amazing with Ezreal early. She can get it done. She can put down a lot of damage, but those champions, you know, may not be able to put down enough. Because unless you fully kill something, you know, like a Sona or a Nami, she's going to heal back up in the laning phase. So your all-ins have to be effective. You have to win. She does have a bad matchup into Thresh, specifically a good Thresh, and Thresh is very popular right now. She has a bad matchup into Janna, who's also pretty popular. She has a bad matchup into like Morgana and Tom Kench, who aren't as popular, but you might still see them around. So she has some very pronounced, like, really bad matchups. Alistar's not great. Not a great matchup for her. So situationally, you could pick her. She could be really strong if you want to all-in the enemy. If you're confident that, you know, you're going to be able to pressure them, that you're not going to need to escape. Because if you fall behind on Leona, like, there's almost nothing you can do in the game, right? If you try to engage and your team's just too weak and you just get blown up, there's not much else you can do. Like, her peel is very limited. Her utility is limited. She's basically, you're going all in. You're dropping a lot of CC. Hopefully they die, you know? So she's okay. She's also going to get outscaled a lot of times by the Enchanters. Okay, Pyke. Pyke is okay. You know, he's similar to Thresh or Leona. If you can grab those squishies and get ahead early, you can get a lot of gold. The fact that you can execute with your ult makes it more likely that you're going to get gold than some of these other champs. So, you know, that can be helpful. He is also a little bit safer than something like a Leona or even a Thresh because he can go invisible and run away, and he can also use his E to escape or engage. The major problem with Pyke is you have to E forward a lot of times in order to land that stun. Like, you can try to land your hook. They'll see it charging up a lot of times. But even if you land the hook, you're still going to have to E forward to get the stun off, which is going to make you vulnerable to the enemy. So, you know, that's why a lot of times they'll take Aftershock. But in reality, I don't know. I just feel like he's kind of squishy to all ends without his tank build. but he doesn't do enough damage without his damage build, so he's kind of stuck in this really weird spot balance-wise, but I think that Pyke definitely could work. Blitzcrank's another one, similar concept. You hook somebody, you blow him up instantly. He has the highest burst, like solo burst of any of these other champs, like the Thresh or the Pyke. You know, if he hooks you, you're dying, basically, because he does a ton of damage himself. He's just very situational, right? Like, if you can still get hooks even if you're behind, but he just doesn't do anything else. You know, it's like, if you land your hook, it's great. If not, you're bad. Where it's like, Thresh has other stuff he can do. You know, he can peel with Flay. He can save people with Lantern. He can Lantern in the jungler for sneaky ganks. Like, there's a lot of other utility that Thresh can bring to the table that Blitzcrank's not going to have. So, Blitz is okay. I think there are probably better choices out there, though. Brand is another one. Brand got nerfed, you know, last patch, I believe. So, he doesn't do as much all-in damage as he used to. He can still work. He can still be powerful. I think Zyra is probably better than he is, but we'll have to see based on the plant damage. I do like that Zyra can scout bushes with her plants. I just think that she has a lot more utility. She has more guaranteed CC in a fight against multiple targets with her ultimate and her E. And she can check things like bushes in different places without having to walk up into the danger zone to ward those. So, I do think that Brand can be good. All right, going down into Tier 3, Rakan. In the right matchups, he can be all right. But his W at close range is not that bad. It feels about the same, maybe even a little bit faster at almost point-blank range. But, you know, at max range, it's a lot slower, and super, super predictable, specifically if you don't have your ult ready. And the hitbox is still really slender. So, he's just rough. If you need hard engage, like guaranteed hard engage, then Rakan can still fit the bill, but he's going to get bullied out early by a lot of these enchanters, and he's just not going to be able to engage back on them most of the time if they have any sort of like movement at all with their W, or to dodge your W. So, I just think he gets bulldozed in the lane right now most of the time in a lot of situations. Okay, Lulu's another one who, historically, when AD carries start coming online, Lulu gets a little bit better. Her scaling is a lot weaker than champions like Sona and Janna because her ratios are small. Like, her E, I think, is like a 0.5 on the damage portion. Her ult is like a 0.5 or a 0.6. So her scaling is fairly low. The heal doesn't, or the ultimate doesn't benefit from plus healing and shielding, because it's just an infusion of health. So you don't really get as much benefit out of like Ardent Sensor and Redemption as some of the other champions. And a big problem with Lulu is like all of her power is focused on one ability, which is her W. So that's either your steroid for the AD carry, it's your movement speed buff, or it's your crowd control on an enemy, right? So it's all three of those things, but it can only be one of them. And so that's kind of what makes her weak. And then her Q is very anemic. It's like, yeah, it does a little bit of damage. Yeah, it slows people, but it's really not that great. Her shield is kind of weak. It's only got 650 range on it. Doesn't scale that well. So she's okay. So you're mostly picking Lulu for her polymorph ability, the W, and her whimsy. And she is very good with champions like Kog'Maw, pretty good with Vayne. So she's definitely strong in the right situation. She has good game against assassins because you can polymorph them potentially, and because you have your ultimate to save people. So Lulu, you know, could be as high as tier 2 right now. I just think that the fact that she doesn't have a heal in lane is going to make a really bad matchup for these other champions that can bully her out with a heal. But she's okay. Alistar can be really good if you're good on him. You know, he roams really well. He's got his WQ. I've heard people say, well, he could just be a good substitute for Rakan. He's not, though. He doesn't have the same level of mobility with his E. He doesn't have a shield. He can't jump over walls to escape dangerous situations. He can't engage and then get back out at the same time. You know, with his RW plus E out. He does have the healing in lane with his passive, I believe. So he's okay. Yeah, he can all in early, and he's going to do more damage than Rakan does. And Yeah, he's going to be tankier than Rakan is, so he's going to have higher base stats. He's not going to get blown up. So, you know, in really high-level play, you might see some more Alistar. I just think he gets outscaled. You know, basically, like, he has really good base stats. His ult makes him very tanky, but then, you know, once he starts getting these other items, he just does not have a lot of synergy with him, so he's okay. I just wouldn't play tanks in kind of lower elo brackets unless you're, like, Challenger or Diamond or something like that. I just think it requires too much coordination. It's just too risky. And you can just end up dying or getting frustrated. And you can see that here, right? Like, there just really aren't tanks up here unless it's an engaged tank or an enchanter. Kind of like Tarek, right? Like, your first tank, like, starts coming in. Like, popular tank would be Leona, clocking in at about 50%. And then you've got stuff like Nautilus is at 49%. Nautilus is still really good. Alistar's like 47. Braum's 47. You know, I forgot to mention Nautilus on here, but I could actually see Nautilus coming in, you know, somewhere around, like, maybe Blitzcrank level. I'm not going to change the list because I already have it here. But I could see Nautilus coming in around, you know, tier 2 somewhere. The problem with Nautilus is if anyone has a stopwatch, they can cancel his ult, or they have any other sort of way to, like, get pretty far away, like to jump over a wall or something like that. Like, there's just a little counterplay to his ult in some circumstances, although sometimes open field, there's just nothing they can do, and it's going to hit him, and you're going to kill him. So I think that Nautilus can be okay, but Fiddlesticks, he can be all right. You know, he's got a nice point-click fear. He's got some decent poke. Remember that poke's not going to matter as much against something like a Soraka or a Sona. They're just going to heal through it probably. You know, if you get ahead, your ultimate can do a ton of damage. So that's good. You are going to get outscaled by Enchanters most likely, so be aware of that. But Fiddlesticks is okay if you want a hard engage AP support. And then Braum, very good in pro play, not as great in solo queue. Similar to Alistar, really high base stats, great in a 0 gold economy where you're only going to get 1 or 2 completed items. But it just doesn't have any scaling in his kit whatsoever for the most part. So he's okay, but there could be better choices. The last couple of ones that I want to mention here. Tom Kench can still be good in the right circumstances, particularly if you're duoed with a jungler or someone you can count on to come down there and gank your lane. Very good counter to hard engaged champs like Thresh, like Leona. You just really have to, like, communicate with your team and, you know, make sure that you're making good use of his ultimate, I think is the big thing. So I expect to still see him. I think he'll still be strong in, like, Challenger and pro play. Solo queue, still going to be iffy. Ornn is someone that has been getting a lot more attention. The ability to buy items later on in the game and give it to your teammates is very powerful. It does generate thousands of gold if you get to a really high level. The problem is games close out a lot of times before you get to those levels. Either you win or you lose before you get to that point. So he's okay. You know, he does more damage. He doesn't have the shield. His brittle actually does a surprising amount of damage early on. He does have a nice initiation ult, which is good. He has a knock-up that you can set up, which is really good. He has decent harass with his Q if you max Q first, which I think is probably the best way to go. So he does have a lot of options, and he is kind of decent in the bot lane. The problem is, you know, you're going to get busted up by Enchanters most of the time. You're not going to be able to fight back while they're harassing you. But yeah, he's okay. I could see it working. Jarvan is another one. I get asked about this a lot. What about AP Jarvan? I think it's terrible. You know, I've tried it. Yeah, if you throw your flag down, you know, it'll constantly, like, put E on your, or, like, Airy on your allies. And yeah, you can spam poke with your javelin or whatever, with your E. And people are like, oh, yeah. Let me pull up Jarvan here. Oh, he's already here. Like, yeah, man, this does pretty good damage, right? This E, you know, it's got 80, 210, 360, 200, 240. So good mana cost, 11 cooldown. You know, guaranteed to hit. It's like 860 range. It's like, yeah, but you know what else is guaranteed to hit? A Nami wave or Sona Q. And they're both going to do similar, if not more damage. And they have more utility as the game goes on. And, you know, they'll trigger Airy. Like, especially with Sona in a long fight, you'll trigger Airy, like, all the time, just as much as that flag will in a fight. So he's okay. You know, you've got your poke early. I could see going Frostfang. I don't know about going like Sork Boots. I wouldn't get any more AP than that. I would switch over and start doing things like Knight's Vow, or Zeke's can be really good on him. But, you know, he's got some decent buffs. He gives extra attack speed here. It doubles his poke damage early. You do have a low cooldown, like pretty nice engage with your R. If they have immobile champions like a Soraka or a Jinx or something on your team, that can be pretty solid. You do have a way to like jump over walls if you get caught out warding, you know, with your flag and drag. You've got a shield. You have armor penetration on your Q. So he's got a pretty good kit. It's just that I feel like you could get blown out early on. But by, you know, harass and enchanters and things like that. But overall, he's pretty decent. Veigar's another one. You know, I know Bizzleberry loves Veigar. He's okay. I don't think he's great against ranged champions because they just sit in the middle and don't get stunned and can kind of, you know, work around and dodge your W. But he can be good. You know, he stacks up a bunch of AP. That Cage is like super disruptive in team fights. So he could be all right. I think he's really situational. He can get blown up. You know, if he gets ganked, he doesn't have any escapes at all. His utility for his team is fairly limited, but he can be all right. And Morgana is another one that I don't run a lot, but can be a good pick into some of these all-in champs. If you don't like Janna, you know, you could pick Morg into things like Braum, Alistar, Nautilus, Rakan, that type of stuff. If you land those Qs, they're really, really long binds. So, you know, Morgana does have some decent utility. I would just rather play something that's a lot more consistent over time, like a Sona or a Janna. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time.